My name's Phil Sterne and welcome to my podcast. I'm a professional coach, and what I know about people is that we get in our own way and fight for our limitations. So I help people focus on what they want and don't want out of their careers and their life, ask them the questions that they've never been asked, and uncover the insights they need to move forward. This is my podcast. Hi there, my podcast today is an episode of my LinkedIn live series, Two CV Writers and a Recruiter, where I join two other careers professionals in sharing ideas and tips and insights with job seekers. And this episode was recorded live on LinkedIn using my phone. It's a bit low tech, but you will no doubt find lots of hits and tips to help you move forward in your career. So get your notepad ready and enjoy. And I should say that because this is one of my early recordings, I hadn't quite worked out that I needed to keep my dog away. You'll know what I mean. It doesn't last too long, I promise. So enjoy. Well, look, let's introduce ourselves then. I'll kick off. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Phil Sterne. I'm a coach specialising really in careers, though. The work I do with my clients tends to maybe start with careers and then go much broader. I like to sort of help people live more fulfilled lives, and obviously careers is usually a big part of that. My background's in recruitment, 20 something years. I'm trying to forget that number because it's going to soon be 30 years. So this is the Two CV Writers and a Recruiter cleverly titled session. So if I'm the first CV writer, the second CV writer is Susie. Susie, do you want to say hi?
Yep, second CV writer in the group here. So thanks, Phil, and thanks for setting this up and having me join you. So what I do is not dissimilar to Phil, a sort of coaching informed approach to career support, particularly around CV writing and other types of career documents. So I do quite a lot on personal statements, covering letters, LinkedIn profiles, corporate bios, and so on. My background is people development, sort of cross-sector experience. I also do a bit of assessment work as well alongside this to kind of keep the perspective live as to what's happening out there in the wonderful world of recruitment and careers. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Susie. And to our recruiter, our resident recruiter, Greg.
Hi guys, so I'm a 20-year recruiter, principally a UK key hire recruiter. I've sat on many sides of a recruitment front throughout my career. I suppose worth saying I've been a job seeker in a downturn as well back in 2002. And, things are different, but things are the same. It's incredibly painful for a lot of people, and I've got a lot of sympathy for that. And throughout my career, I've worked as an agency recruiter, I've worked in-house, I've supported HR teams, I've been a hiring manager, so I've got a pretty good holistic view of how recruitment works, and also some of the myths that we sort of come across. So for me, these events are about trying to make things a bit easier for job seekers so that you can cut through some of the crap and make better decisions.
Definitely. Thanks both for your introductions. Yeah, and that's why we do this. I think you put it very well, cutting through the crap, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's also a lot of, even if it's not misinformation, there's a lot of kind of fog, and I think there's, particularly with CV writing or going to interviews or making applications or talking with recruiters or talking with clients, if you are a recruiter, there's kind of not one way of doing things, right? There's not, everyone's out there just to do it better. And, from a candidate perspective, I guess, just get noticed. So being able to do enough, and often what that means is, being able to when we talk about getting noticed, it's it's actually not as difficult as you might think. I don't think it, because you kind of just have to find where the average is and just be a bit better. So what I hope to be able to do with these sessions is kind of shine a light on the ways that candidates, job seekers, can just be a bit better enough, but also understand what's happening in the background on the recruitment side with the clients. So I guess a place to start, I mean, it's been 8 weeks since we were talking about it, but we were talking about something completely different. So I'd be really interested, we're halfway through the year. What sort of trends, if any, have either of you seen? So Susie from a client perspective and client needs, and Greg also from a client need perspective. So we'll start with you, Susie.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's challenging out there, isn't it? I think for those of us who are here on LinkedIn, it's you've seen a real sort of proliferation of sort of layoffs, restructures, job seekers looking, as you said, for support, for trusted sources of information. So I think a lot of clients that come to me definitely are sort of coming from that place where actually they are wanting to do what Greg suggests, which is to cut through the crap, because there is just so much out there. And some of it's not even disinformation, it's just a lot of information, and actually just really wanting support and sort of bespoke support, one-to-one support to just really sort of work through that. I think one of the other sort of key things I've seen this year is definitely an increased number of senior professionals, so sort of head of, director level, sort of and upwards of that, who are needing to put together a CV, a LinkedIn profile, actually oftentimes for the first time in their career, or the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting, and I think that from the conversations that I've had with those clients, a lot of it is around the fact that those kind of casual chats and fireside kind of chemistry sort of sessions and meetups and so on, which absolutely are the right thing to be doing, and still sort of leveraging and working that network is the right route in. But at some point you come up against actually, can we have that CV? We need to do our due diligence. We need to work that through from a process point of view. So I've definitely worked with an increased number of clients for whom actually there's a lengthy career history, some fantastic experience, loads of impact, really senior level, big stuff, and actually sort of pulling that together into a really compelling narrative that's not just a kind of biography style story of your life, which that's where the word CV becomes a bit of a misnomer nowadays, really, but actually is about an impact focused kind of pitch, really, and that's definitely something that I've seen, and that's actually what I love working on with those clients. I really enjoy doing that, and they I think really value sort of seeing that come to life for the first time after a glittering career, really.
Well, I think I'm It must be a trend, because I'm seeing it as well. So that if two of us are seeing it, therefore it must be true. I just, even this last couple of weeks, I found myself talking with folks that have perhaps had long careers and been made redundant. Perhaps been with the same company for 20 plus years, and have perhaps been involved in. I mean, a lot of the people that I work with have done sort of transformational change and.
Yeah.
In all sorts of ways, shapes and forms, but this is the one where they've transformationally changed themselves out of a job, or it's the business has changed direction, and they're there kind of going, right, well, every job I've had in this company, I've not needed a CV, and now I either suddenly do, or indeed, kind of, what do I do, and is it going to get a new job, or is it to go and set something else up on my own, or is it to go contracting? Is it to go down the non-exec director route, or is it a combination of all of these things, right? So in some cases it's I just want to get another job, so I don't want it to be this, but actually what's out there, I don't really even know what my applicable skills are, because I've just been doing the thing for 20 years, 30 years.
Down and
and nobody sort of sat down with me and teased it out of me.
Yes, Yes, it's that coming up for air moment, I think, that sort of strikes you at a sort of certain, stage of your career where you it's important to take that opportunity to really think about what you want, the choices that you can make, and put yourself in a position where those choices can be choiceful, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
really.
well, intentional, right? Intentional. Because, the thing is, when you and I've been there, and I'm sure most of the people who are listening have been in this place where they've kind of gone, well, I've intentionally gone and taken that job. Well, there's a reasonable chance that you've gone for a job that you saw advertised, and you thought, oh yeah, I quite like the look of that, and then you've punted your CV over, and then you've had an interview, and then you've got the job. Under the kind of impression that you've somehow been intentional about it. I mean, yes, you had a choice whether or not to apply for it, but did you actually just stop for a moment and go, well, what is it I really want? What are the kind of key tenets of what I want to do, or what's going to give me fulfillment? But so I guess that's, and certainly seeing that from people like you say, kind of who've never really needed a CV, it does seem to be something that's a growing trend. Greg, what are you seeing from a sort of a client demand, and how is that sort of
I suppose
change?
there's two sides to it, because there's a candidate element as well.
So
recruitment is generally accepted to be a really good litmus test for the state of the economy. I think wherever you are around the world, when things are not going well, people don't tend to recruit. And when there's a market of uncertainty, then the sort of more senior transformational roles, where perhaps some people that you're helping would be looking for roles, are less likely to go ahead, because if you don't know what the future holds, it's quite hard to think what transformation looks like. And certainly over the last 18 months, I think it's been a really difficult climate for a lot of people. All the candidates I speak to, unless they're in work, have had really tough job searches, lots of bad experiences, lots of competition. And I think generally for a lot of people, it's been a very stressful and draining time to be looking for work. I think a lot of people have talked about green shoots over the last few months, but those shoots seem to disappear quite often as well. And it takes an intervention like Rishi standing in the rain announcing an election to make companies go, oh, let's just pause for a little bit. And obviously today's a big day in the UK, because it's voting day for a lot of people. So I'll be doing that after we've finished up later. And I think what we'll probably see is, irrespective of what happens, it enables companies to make a decision. So we'll probably see in the next few weeks new roles coming up, and that's good news for everyone. But coming back to the candidate piece, so as a recruiter, a lot of the vacancies I recruit historically have been tough to fill roles where it requires a lot of research, and you can advertise and get some good applicants, but typically the bias is on looking for people and trying to bring them forward for the right reasons. But over the last 6 months, I've recruited quite a few roles where there's a huge amount of great candidates on the marketplace, and for me it's become quite stressful, because when I speak to these guys, and if you've got 40 great candidates for a vacancy, and 20 of them are in quite difficult situations financially because they've been looking for a few months, then it's quite high stakes. So it is tough to go back to them and say no and try and give feedback. But fundamentally, there's just one job, so you're going to have, in that scenario, 39 people who aren't going to get the job. It's philosophically interesting experiencing that, because I've never seen that before. I've never had a situation across multiple vacancies where there's too many great candidates to make a selection from. But that's the reality of the market we're looking at, and that's across things like PAs and executive assistants, office coordinators, marketing roles, talent acquisition certainly has been in a really difficult space as a market over the last year or so. Even at a senior level, chief operating officer roles, there's lots of great people out there. And I think it comes back to that point you said, Phil, on paper, there's lots of great candidates with transferable skills, but it's the applicable skills that really matter. And when you've got that core of 40 great candidates for one vacancy, actually, when you go through conversation, maybe 8 of those have got the right applicable skills, but on paper, they look like great candidates. So for me as a recruiter, it's when I see those CVs coming through, is can I see how those skills apply? And that helps me make a better decision on who to take forward.
Good.
So that's the sort of summary of where I'm seeing this at the moment.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to a lot of what I'm hearing in the market, that people
have we lost Phil?
anyone?
Oh, hello.
Oh, can you?
It's still gone.
Well, what?
Oh, we've lost Phil.
No.
Oh no, we've lost our host.
Yeah.
We're just down to one CV writer and a recruiter now.
Well, I'm
I
definitely.
think Phil will be back in a minute, and I think Phil's the person who's probably going to let people ask questions. So we're going to have to bumble along for now.
I don't understand. I'm shouting and waving.
But, interesting. What was going through my mind, Greg, as you were sort of talking there, was just thinking about that piece around, those transferable skills, applicable skills. And it just kind of got me thinking about the work that I do and the kind of coaching and guidance I provide clients that I work with around this point of tailoring, customizing, targeting, your CV, your introductory kind of contact, your sort of focus, your target, your strategy, really. Would you say from sort of on the receiving end of that, that's a real kind of differentiator for you with the clients that you work with, where, it feels really that they absolutely have, honed down that experience and the skill set, essentially joined the dots?
When I do any piece of recruitment, I accept that people don't necessarily know how to write CVs because, it should be a skill that people learn, but it's not a skill that you think to learn unless you're actively looking for a job. And for some people, they can write great CVs, but for most people, it's a skill to learn. So if you hit an unexpected job search, of course, your CV is not going to be optimal. So for me personally, I try and give people the benefit of the doubt and have those conversations. But I think in an environment where there's a lot of competition and everyone's got the same set of transferable skills, showing how those apply in the context of a role where you're applying for is a really good skill to learn. And if you can't do it, that's where getting expert advice it can be really helpful.
Can you hear me?
The reason that's an important step to take in a job search is, it's a really common question for me when I speak to a job seeker who's been out of work for a while. I've got all these amazing transferable skills. Why can't employers see that? And the reason is because everyone's got transferable skills. If you talk to a CXO, what are your transferable skills? It'll be, stakeholder management, financial planning, leading cross-functional teams. If you write a list of 10 and then you speak to 20 chief operating officers and ask for transferable skills, their list is going to be broadly the same. So, that 40 CV point, if everyone's got those same transferable skills, all those CVs look the same.
I think, there's a lot of people out there now that are quite bruised and battered from some of the experiences they have. And I think, as we were saying earlier, it's a mix of disinformation and, opinion and kind of just lots of information. And as Phil said, there's no one right way to do any of this, really. So I think, what people can do to help themselves, it is to kind of soak up what is out there. There's sessions like this, lots of us, share tips, don't we, Greg? I know your blog is brilliant for insights. Phil, you've just done a whole kind of series on CV basics. So, it's kind of scoop all of that up and kind of have the confidence then to say, right, this is the approach I'm taking. Almost trusting your gut instinct, I think, is quite an important part of job seeking success, really.
Yeah.
And kind of starting to figure out what maybe does and doesn't work based on kind of practical application of that, sort of narrowing the funnel a bit. So, where you've got the most traction or the least traction. And if you're working with a recruiter like yourself, Greg, to be guided, I would always say this to clients, be guided kind of by that. If you're in that sort of, relationship and at that stage, be kind of guided by that for this circumstance. And then, think about how you might take that next step to close the gap kind of next time if a next time comes. But, it's not easy.
So there's a phenomenon which has kind of been defined over the last couple of years called candidate resentment, which is kind of the opposite of candidate experience. So when you're applying for a job, the experience you have is your candidate experience. And so everyone talks about what bad candidate experience is at the moment. And of course, the more people talk, the more it comes together. And so now that's called candidate resentment. And most employers don't realise that's the thing. And they don't realise that when they put a proposition forward to a candidate, this is the interview process, this is what you've got to go through. It's going to be 73 stages and 14 presentations. And there's a bit of arrogance around that. But then they think, we want people who are committed, so this is why we're doing it. But they don't realise that those same candidates have been shafted by other recruitment processes. And I mentioned this earlier. It creates a kind of gambler's fallacy. So gambler's fallacy is the notion that in a pure chance gamble, like a roulette wheel, if you do a sequence of bets, then you think that those inform the future bets. So say you've lost 8 times in a row, you're like, oh, my luck's going to turn because the night time can't happen. But of course, in chance, it's exactly the same.
Odds. Yes.
But in a job search, you think, oh, I've been shafted 6 times by employers who've asked for a half-hour presentation. Therefore, I'm not going to do any more presentations. And I hear that from candidates. But I've got this situation with a client at the moment. They've asked for a presentation, and neither of the candidates have presented an objection to that at all because they haven't had bad experiences from the sounds of it so far, so they're kind of new to it. But had I gone to someone who'd been out of work for 6 months and say, look, it is a half-hour presentation, I appreciate that's a bit of an ask. I'm sure some people will say, well, I don't do presentations anymore because it's a waste of time. And that's where it can be a gambler's fallacy, because if an employer, that's their requirement, and everything else they've got good intent, then they'll expect you to do it. And if you don't do it, then actually that's part of their decision, because this is someone who's not prepared to abide by the rules.
I'm going to open this up. We've got, it says 35 listening. I suspect that includes us 3, so 30.
Well, I'm not really listening. So.
Well, no, I thought not. So, folks, if you're listening and you've got a question or something you want to ask, or a comment that you want to make, or a situation that you've been in and you just want to get a view on it, then please do stick your hand up. We have Nicole. So Nicole, I'm going to bring you in. So we have Nicole Riley. You just need to unmute yourself.
Is that working?
It is. PMO professional and squirrel matador.
I've got a question already.
I'm compelled to ask what that means, Nicole, before we even get going.
Cat herder is a typical project management name, so it just sounds like an evolution of that.
It is absolutely that. It's point of difference, and it gets people asking.
I love it.
My question was actually for Phil. You mentioned that you've done a CV Basics series recently.
Yeah.
Where can we find out more about that?
Well, I did it actually in my LinkedIn posts. So if you go into, I probably could go back through it and consolidate it into one thing, and I probably will do that and put it on my blog, which you can find at philsterne.substack.com. But yeah, if you go into my posts in the meantime and sort of look for my profile and go to my posts, I'm quite prolific with posting, so you may have to sift through them, but they've been there over the last 3 weeks or so, and they're numbered 1 through 10. But yeah, so have a look. But that has given me a nudge to pull them together and release as a oneer.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay. Any other questions, or was that everything?
That was my question. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for coming along, Nicole.
Good luck with the squirrels.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So, June Hogan. Hi, June. How are you doing?
Oh, this is new. I've never been muted and spoken on a live like this before. So, thank you, Phil.
No worries.
Yeah, really interesting listening to all of your observations. And I'm curious around career changes. I've got a few clients at the moment who are wanting to make a career change, some more sort of dramatic than others. I just wonder what your thoughts were, particularly around the CV perspective. I mean, there's a skills-based CV idea. There's the kind of, pulling out their thread and how they can see the transferable and applicable skills that you talked about. But what do you think about career change? Because it can be quite daunting, and I think sometimes puts people off.
Are you talking about kind of wholesale career change? And for those of you listening, June's an outplacement specialist, and June and I have done a bit of work together in the past. So thanks for coming on, June. When you say career changes, do you mean like wholesale, like into something else entirely?
Yes. Yeah, I've got a couple like that. Just want to do, I've had enough of doing what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years and want to do something completely different for the next kind of, 10, 20 years of their career.
Right.
So yeah, it's super interesting for me, as a coach, but just wonder what your thoughts were on how to kind of start presenting that when they get to that place where they're out there looking for those roles and wanting to put themselves forward.
Well, I guess it depends on the degree of the change, right? If it's going from management consultancy to horticulture, that's quite a shift. But I've got some ideas myself. But Susie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So I've definitely had some exposure to this, and some amazing people who have, and particularly I think kind of post-COVID, I think there's been a lot of evaluation of life, and you're probably seeing this, June, in the clients that you're coaching. What's this all about? What do I want? And I think maybe COVID was a sort of trigger for a lot of that reflection for people. So I think there's been probably quite a bit of that over the last few years, and of course the market where it is, as we've been talking about. So I've seen some brilliant pivots. So I've seen teaching into HR, teaching into project management, and kind of to a certain extent NED CVs as well, actually, where you're having to really sort of apply quite a specific lens to what is usually quite a lengthy and senior and sort of expansive career. Mm-hmm. So from a kind of writing of the CV perspective, for me it's about exactly that, almost kind of taking an imaginary lens and thinking, right, if I'm going to hold that over this extensive experience and skill set, what is it that I need to draw out, pull together? What is it that we can kind of leverage to a certain extent? Is there any kind of little flourishes of specific experience or exposure or connection with this new industry or new profession or new sector or whatever it might be? And let's kind of really bring that sort of front and centre. And the thing that's quite challenging about doing that for yourself is it's quite hard to sort of step back and do that, because all these experiences have of course informed and created the professional that you are, but it's kind of knowing when to kind of dial some of them down or let some of them go, or just sort of accept that by kind of keeping in there, they kind of dilute the relevance of the message that you are now looking to project. So it's definitely quite a sort of ruthless red pen exercise a lot of the time. So a lot of sort of stripping back, but again, it's then as certainly Phil, I know you'll be the same as well, sort of with every CV, is writing it for what you want, not necessarily what you're doing now or what you've done, which sounds like an odd thing to say, but it's about sort of you're orientating your CV to where you're going, not just kind of done.
Writing the CV for the job you want, not the job you've got. Is pretty crucial, because otherwise you find yourself writing something that's or submitting something that's full of noise. And your point about kind of giving stuff up is it's can be quite a big thing, and I've heard people when I've done this with people, and I've said, right, okay, well that bit's just not relevant. I mean, it was big, right? And it's like giving up a child, or choosing which one's going to go, and that can be really hard when it's your kind of much is made of lived experience in inverted commas, but when it has been your life, it can be hard to let some of that stuff go, and at the same time kind of rethink or reframe that experience. So I suppose June, you mentioned kind of that kind of golden thread. I think the golden thread and identifying the golden thread is super valuable in helping people remember what they're good at, and helping provide them direction as to what they could do next. Mm-hmm. It can lead to like a pivot in the career. But more so, what I tend to find is people. Well, what is difficult about career change, complete wholesale career change, is doing everything at once. right? So I guess my take on it, apart from the CV and golden threads and whatnot, would be to say, right, well, you've got your job on one hand, your specialism, and you've got your company. If you, and I guess, and or sector. So I guess, June, most of the people you're dealing with are facing redundancy, right? So the company itself is at the moment not too important for this particular bit of the discussion, but effectively that becomes industry. So trying to move industry and role at the same time is really hard. Whereas if you sort of retain one of those things, so say you stay in the same industry but adjust your role in the next move, then that's giving you a different amount of experience. So a different type of experience. So in the next role, you can shift industry. So it's easier to do one at a time than it is to do both at once, because people will just look at you and go, well, why are you even applying for this? You've got no experience either in the industry or in the job type. So if you're in sales and you're in pharmaceuticals and you really want to be in agriculture and operations, well, it's a bit like a Rubik's cube. You've got to turn one thing before you can turn the other thing. So try and get a sales job in agriculture, which is in itself going to be difficult, moving from pharmaceuticals, and then try and shift into an ops job, or try and shift into an ops job in pharmaceuticals, so you can then move that operational experience into another sector. So that would be my take. Greg, have you got a thought on this? I mean, you must see this, right?
I think you covered it really well. It's a really long conversation, but I'll try and sort of summarise my thoughts. So I think identity, first of all, figure out what you like, what you want to get away from. It may be that if you being made redundant from a company, the things that you hate are company specific and not actually career specific. So actually doing the same thing in a different organisation may solve the problem you think you have.
Yeah.
If you are transitioning industry, figuring out the things you're good at and you enjoy, what does that look like in different careers? Well, actually, you could use something like ChatGPT to say, these are my skills. What careers would this be good for? And that could give you some good ideas. When you've sort of figured out the kind of roles you want to do in the kind of industries, talk to people doing it already. Find out what it's like, and if it's actually something you do want to do. Find out what the reality of the marketplace is in those roles. If you want to transition into a role which has no vacancies and hundreds of great candidates, well, I think it's probably a bit of a waste of time at the moment. So I think there's a lot of identity work to do before you actually start going out to do it, which can probably save a bit of bother if you find out actually the things that you do need to do aren't what you thought they were before you that piece.
When you say talk to people that are doing it, and I kind of give this advice all the time as well, and it's easy for us to say, right? But when you've been in an organisation, I guess for X number of years, and you're to some extent institutionalised, maybe, or you just don't have the your confidence has taken a knock, and then somebody says, oh, just talk to people who are doing that job already, and you're like, what? Are you serious? I've actually got to talk to people. You're having a laugh. So what advice would you, or what thinking would you kind of provide people with to help them make that, make those connections and actually have conversations with probably complete strangers?
I think it's true of many things in life, that the things that we worry about are harder to procrastinate over than just getting it done. I think if you ask people for help, sure, they might ignore you, but eventually you'll come across someone who is prepared to help. I think just by virtue of doing things will happen. And it's the same for anything in a job search. Writing that first LinkedIn post, or knocking, or just have a sort of more curious ways of looking for work. You can build it up to be something really hard to do, but actually if you just try and do it, sometimes good things can happen.
That's it. I mean, it could be as simple as just literally kind of doing a search in LinkedIn for, I don't know, the job that's coming to my mind is ops director. I don't know why, but let's say ops director in, I've said agriculture, so I'm going to use agriculture. I don't know why I've come to agriculture today at all. Perhaps it's because I'm sat looking over a field, and see who comes up. And all you can do, you can see who's already in your network, who are first degree connections, and just pop them over a message and say, hi, I know we're total strangers, but I'm considering a career shift into your field. I found you. That's what looks like what you do. I'd love to have 20 minutes with you just to ask you a couple of questions about what it's like, or see if you can point me in any direction or give me some advice. And guess what? Most people are quite happy to talk about themselves and what they've done and how good it is in their business or otherwise. So at the very least, you may get some information that would be really helpful. At the most, you could make a really good new connection. And I say this all the time. You'd be amazed at what can come from one conversation. Yeah. One conversation can lead to another contact, can lead to this, they might have a job going. But, you have to kind of get into a bit of a mindset of, actually, you never know, what's the, what could possibly go wrong or nothing, you just ask a question.
The last point I'd say, I know that people have wanted to ask questions, is to just check the practicalities of shifting as well. So say you'd love to move into agricultural sales from pharmaceuticals, you probably have a bit of a shock on salary. And we all have bills to pay. So I think there's a few practical steps that are worth thinking about first.
Sure, cool. All right. Thanks, guys. And thank you, June, for coming along and asking what a brilliant question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Cool. So next we have Grace. I'm going to bring Grace.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. We can hear you loud and clear, Grace. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you all?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. What's your question?
So my question is, I think you've all touched on the fact that the job search at the moment is pretty brutal. And I think I've been doing quite well in terms of getting on with other projects and things that I think will enhance my CV. But what if you're in a situation where you're applying but you're not getting through to interview, therefore you're not getting any feedback as to sort of where you fell short? What do you do then? Because I think it's like, I'm sort of in that place of, well, do I take a course? Do I, do something else? So I'd be interested from your perspectives, what you do in that situation where you're not really getting the feedback you need to sort of tweak your CV and stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll take this to start off with. I mean, I guess it depends on how closely your experience meets the job. And I know that, there's a lot out there about, if you meet, just apply for the job. If you meet sort of 60, 70% of the criteria, just apply for it. And I know that there's some stats, and forgive me, I don't know them. I could make them up. That says, broadly speaking, I think it is 60. Women are more likely to apply for a job if they can meet sort of 90 to 100% of the given criteria, whereas men more likely to apply. They'll apply if they reckon they can meet sort of 60, 70% of it. But either way, and by the way, that can equally be really annoying for a recruiter when you're staring down sort of 200 applications and you go through them and go, why has this person even applied, right? Because they're not demonstrating the capability in their CV, and it's almost completely irrelevant. So I think that the advice would be to try and be really objective when you've got your CV on the screen and you've got the job on the screen. And maybe getting somebody else, a friend that that is objective, or a family member, or dare I suggest it, somebody like myself or Susie, to have a look at it with you and go, well, okay, so how actually applicable are the skills that to the point Greg was making actually earlier about applicable skills? How applicable are the skills that you've identified on your CV to the job? Is there a clear conversation going on between the job and the CV? Because what we tend to do when we're writing our own CV is that we say, right, well, I'm a project manager, or I'm a program manager, and I'm applying for other project manager jobs. They know I'm a project manager because it says I'm a project manager, and I've said that this is the kind of thing that I've been working on. But then, if the project job is saying, it's quite specific about like technical skills, like, must be able to lead project board meetings, build governance, deliver Gantt charts, do presentations, and you haven't got any of that in your CV, you just say, I led a project, then you're missing a trick. Because if it's being really explicit in the job, it's an opportunity for you to be pretty explicit in the CV, and then the person who's reading it is likely to kind of connect the dots a bit more quickly. The second thing I'd say is having an adjustable core skills section, and I forget, Susie, I think we've probably had this conversation not live, or I think it's in the privacy of our own conversation about the skills section versus an achievement section. And my personal approach is to include a core skills section that's effectively like a table, although you don't necessarily need to use a table, you can just use tabs of keywords, and have sort of like 3 columns of 3 or 3 columns of 4. Don't want any more than 12 effectively, otherwise what's a core skill and what's just all of your skills. But with keywords that really line up to what they're asking for, not only in the essential skills bit, but in the what this job's about and what we're trying to achieve bit of the job advert. And I think what people tend to do is they go straight to the what are the requirements and go, well, I can do that, and then punt the CV off without having really properly read the bit above it that's saying, in this job, you'll be doing this, and you'll be working with these people, and you'll be doing that, and you'll be doing this. Well, make sure that there's a conversation happening in the key skills section, in the capability of your CV to what the job really wants. And I think people miss that. Susie?
Yeah, and I think sort of building on from that and say, Grace, assuming that you're doing all of that, I think it's also thinking about your CV as part of the strategy that you've got, particularly if maybe you're, as we've just been talking about, maybe career changing or making a bit of a pivot or doing sort of something slightly different. And it's thinking about, what you might be doing around the use of that CV, like the conversations that you might be having with the organisation that you're, looking to put that application into, or with the recruiter that's, that's working on that role, so that as far as possible, if you are as warm a candidate as you can be, and I know that's not always possible, but as warm a candidate as you can be, and I guess Greg's perspective here is going to be particularly helpful, but that there may just be that sort of chink of light that you can sort of push open a little bit and actually seek that feedback or kind of look to talk to me about the likely strength of my candidacy before I put in this application. Can I just send through your CV? There might be conversations like that you potentially possibly could be having, as well as the stuff that Phil's talked about in terms of the actual content of the CV. So it's just sort of, I always think it's important to remember that the CV is part of the picture. It's often the kind of the sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The sort of, I guess, the crucial element of that ultimately when it comes to actually putting that application in. But it's also thinking about what you're kind of doing around that. And as we've sort of talked about, if there's sort of no formalised feedback forthcoming, then it could be worth asking the question. And this is a completely anecdotal, it was from a while ago sort of story, but I did exactly the same, or I did exactly that when I made an application, wasn't successful. Thank you very much. Off you go by, but actually went back and said, do you have any feedback? Because this is something I'd really like to pursue. And actually something came of that. Sometimes there is that opportunity to kind of build on that sort of connection, particularly if you are a sort of reasonably warm candidate in terms of the kind of process leading up to that point of application. So that might be another thing to consider alongside what Phil's talked about in terms of how you're actually presenting yourself as the match for this particular opportunity.
Thanks, Susie. I just as you were talking, something else came to me as well. So I'm just going to throw this out there as well. I think quite often I find myself working with people with quite what appear on the surface anyway to be quite mixed career backgrounds. So they've done something here and done a bit of this and done a bit of that. And for those people, look, if you're looking at a CV as a recruiter or a hiring manager, going, well, I can see there's a bit of this and a bit of that, but generally they've done so many different things. I don't really see that the strength of experience is is there. But then it comes back to the conversation we were having with June a few minutes ago about the golden thread, and about being able to pull out the core capability that lends itself really well to that job that you're applying for, and absolutely making sure that in each of those jobs, and it might involve tweaking the job titles so that, you know, they make sense to the world, and making sure that golden thread is in there around, you know, if it's stakeholder management or project leadership, or if it's this or that, you know, making sure that's there and clear and present in each of those jobs as far as possible, and kind of going to town on that. But sometimes the challenge is actually identifying what that golden thread is in the first place, and having the confidence to kind of go out there and do it. And I think that's certainly a lot of what I do. I'm sure Susie does as well.
And I know that Greg's perspectives on this is going to be really important to bring in, but just quickly, I think this is where the kind of infamous should you or shouldn't you send a cover letter kind of question might have some bearing here, and whether it's actually a cover letter, you know, on an A4 document attached, you know, alongside your CV, or whether it's simply a kind of introductory kind of pitch in the body of an email, which is really how I sort of tend to see you know, really actually being used nowadays. You know, if you've got the kind of confidence, and actually, you know, quite a nice approach can be to really sort of front some of that up in your cover letter. Say, look, I know I've got quite a mixed background, but let me tell you about what that thread is, and actually what I can bring and the value I can offer through these experiences, and almost kind of face into any doubts that the recruiter or the hiring manager, the hiring professional may have, so that you're kind of, you know, you're opening them up, being really transparent and saying, you know, I'm not worried about this, so you don't need to be either. That kind of confidence breeds confidence approach. So that might be something to consider as well. And, you know, maybe adjusting kind of the tone or the kind of approach of your cover letter could be something that you just experiment with to see if that maybe might serve you well there as well. So sorry, just to add that in.
All right. I won't follow the temptation to add a fifth comment.
Sorry, Greg. You said you were the rose between two thorns, didn't we? Proven, case closed.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, you go for it, Greg.
I've got a few things to say. One, generally, and secondly, more project management specific. I think one of the big issues in recruitment is that most job adverts are terrible, and they're generic. They don't really say actually what they're looking for, which makes it really hard for anyone who's applying to know if they're going to be suitable. So when you apply for essential requirements, one of the essential requirements might be good communication skills, but don't we all have that, even if we can't actually speak properly? So it's a horror show to apply in this market for a lot of people, and it's not surprising that you're not getting much feedback, because I hear that from so many candidates. You know, people I speak to who haven't heard from another recruiter. It's bizarre. I think are great candidates, and it's because of the market, and companies are under-resourced and they're getting too many candidates, and there's nothing you can really do about that as an individual job seeker. But I think it's important to know, because it's really easy to take that pressure down on our own shoulders and think, well, what am I doing wrong? And it's quite possible you're doing everything right, but it's just the market working against you. And I think that's a really important point to make. Now, when I assess applications, there's three things that I look at. The first is, does this application meet the essential requirements I set out in the advert? And I think that's something a lot of people talk about, especially when you're tailoring a CV. Second point I look at is credibility. You know, that could be anything. It's very subjective, but if it's a really poorly put together CV, those are points which work against the candidate, unfortunately, because, you know, we need to know that someone can articulate their experience of, for example, or it might be that they've had 30 jobs in 2 years. You know, a lot of that can be market related. It might be a lot of temps roles, but equally, sometimes you can look into that and think, well, actually, is this person going to take this job and then nap up after 2 weeks? It's not a complete answer, but the credibility thing makes you ask questions of the candidate, and the more and more questions you ask, the harder it is to see that person as a suitable candidate. So, and that is something I think most recruiters will do when they look at CVs. The third thing that I look at, which most people don't talk about but is so key, is context fit. So the context of someone's career versus the context of a particular vacancy is one of the biggest aspects of ensuring someone's going to enjoy a role, do well in it, and be there in a couple of years' time. No one talks about it. It's absolutely bonkers. And the reason that you don't is because it takes skill to establish context. And you don't see it in most adverts. The context of this vacancy is we're a rapidly growing startup who just had investment. It's ambiguous. It doesn't suit someone who enjoys a structured role. You'll need to have these skills to adapt well to it. And some of those skills might be seen as red flags to some people, but actually they're a key part of a role to be successful within it. Or conversely, if you work in a public sector, this is the hierarchy, this is the organisation, this is what you work to. It's the kind of information that as someone who's judiciously reading an advert will allow you to decide, well, actually, this isn't the right role for me because I'm not the right person and because I don't have this, that and the other. And when you look at a generic advert, often you can't tell that, unfortunately. So you might look at that and think, yeah, I'm a great candidate. But if the context of it isn't there, you might be a great person, but you're not suitable for the role. So that's the sort of general thing. On the project management side of it, this might be a controversial opinion, which is a very LinkedIn thing to say. I think that most companies don't know what a project manager is. So when they recruit for a project manager, what they do is they have a look at someone else's project management role and they copy and paste the job description into their own. And then they run that as an advert. And similarly, most project managers will say, well, I'll put my job description in my CV and then that'll show that I'm the project manager. And again, that comes back to the context fit side of it. If you don't actually know what the projects are to be managed and what the outcomes are and deliverables, it's quite hard to actually know if you're the right kind of project manager for it. And equally, if you can't establish that of your own vacancy, how can you tell if a candidate's suitable just from those terms? So I think project management's quite an unusual role in that it suffers from poor project management documentation a lot of the time in what is a job description and the CV. Were companies to get those right, then I think it'd be a lot easier for a lot of people. And I can say that specifically because I've recently recruited a newly created project management role for a company, and we found a great person who's doing really well. And I spoke to so many great candidates. We had such a strong shortlist because it's a tough environment for project managers, and because the experiences they've had is exactly what I said. They applied for generic adverts which needed a project manager, which they are, but actually they're not the right people. So it's really tough. And Grace, I think you have to try and establish that a lot of it is the market working against you. It doesn't pay the bills, but I hope it takes a bit of pressure off you.
No, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Grace, for your question, and Susie and Greg for your answers there. Now, we literally have like a couple of minutes before we need to close, but we do have one more person asking to speak, and that's Jenna. So if you just bear with me, Jenna, I'll bring you into the conversation. Hopefully, if it's a quick question, we'll be able to all give you a quick answer. And if not, we can always put something together and share with everybody afterwards. So, or indeed just overrun. So let's see where we get to. Hopefully there you should be coming up. Jenna. Oh, Jenna's gone. Okay, never mind. I just brought her into the conversation. She's disappeared. Hey ho. Oh no, she's back. She's back. It's you want to hit the mute button, Jenna? There we go.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I tried to unmute and I accidentally left.
It happens. How can we help?
So I will try and keep this quick. I had two fairly recent experiences in the job hunt. I've been officially unemployed for about a year, but had some sort of small part-time jobs and things like that. And I had two rejections recently, one of which was simply one line in an email saying, I've been inundated with applications, so we won't be continuing. So literally nothing to do with me, just I've got too many applications, and so I don't want to look at yours. And the other was, I was basically informed by the recruiter that they were looking for essentially a personality hire. She didn't say that in so many words. But she said, obviously we want someone competent, but the main thing we want is when someone gets off the phone with her, we want them to say, God, she was lovely. And she also said they had based it on another woman So they were just looking for that person basically.
Oh dear.
And I'm just sort of wondering if you have any obviously quickly advice for not only a really difficult market at the moment for people searching for a job, but also just how to keep going. What sort of motivation after you get people like that clearly just don't care, and don't look at your skills, don't even bother looking at your CV or your cover letter, and if you spent all these hours, if you have any words of advice for just how to keep going when you need a job, you can't stop searching.
No. Well,
can I interject quickly?
Go.
Jenna and I know each other a little bit from a recent recruitment exercise. Hopefully I wasn't one of the two you mentioned.
No, you weren't.
Why don't we have a chat and we can sort of chat through that. I mean, it is really tough. I mean, we collaborated on an office coordinator vacancy recently, and Jenna went to interview, and unfortunately it's one of those situations where it was a great shortlist and there wasn't really any feedback to give. I know Jenna was quite keen to get some feedback, but it's one of those stupid situations where there was someone who was closer to the mark, but you're a great candidate, there's nothing you can really do with that. And unfortunately that's the nature of the market we've got at the moment. It's really frustrating. There's so many people out there, and bad experiences become really clear when companies just want to make a selection quickly and can't bother even to have a look at all the applications. So what I'd say, Jenna, is why don't we have a chat? And if Phil and Susie have got time to carry on now, then obviously we can talk there as well.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sounds like you. I know it sounds tough, Jenna, but I think it sounds like you dodged a couple of bullets there from what you said of those two particular scenarios as well. So best wishes to you.
I'd definitely say, Jenna, that it's so hard, right, when you putting applications out there and you're putting your life and soul into them and all of that, to not take that personally, right? They don't know you. There's no reason at all why you should take it personally. And I know you've not said taking it personally, but I think it's very easy to kind of get into that. Is it just me or situation? And if you think about a business that desperately needs to hire a person, and they've got 200 applications, and actually hiring isn't there. And by the way, I'm not here to defend the kind of we're not going to get back to you, or we're not even going to bother looking at your application or whatever. And I've got ghosting in a big circle. We didn't even get onto ghosting today, incredibly. But the people, I can see here, your assistant manager at a hotel manager, their main job isn't recruiting. So if they've got suddenly get 200 applications, and they've got to bang through 200 applications, or even if they're lucky enough to have an HR person, they might get through 50 and go, well, look, I've already got a short list of 5. We've been oversubscribed, been inundated. I reckon we can make a decent decision off these 5 out of these 50 or out of these 40. And so I suspect it's perhaps not always a case of can't be bothered to look through them. It's more just a case of, I've only got so much time. This isn't my full-time job. I've got what seems to be the right candidates for this kind of job. And actually, if they're not, then I can always go back to the other 150 and have another look. But sometimes when it's not your kind of full-time job, you've got to kind of make a decision somewhere. Perhaps. No, it doesn't make it any easier for you, but I've certainly been there on the other side of the table years ago, where I've kind of thought, oh my God, really, there's a lot of people to go through, and I'm already finding lots of people that are really good. So
it's really hard to be fair and even. And there's
totally.
a lot of arbitrariness to success in the sort of job searches we're seeing at the moment. So, and it doesn't help as an individual, but that's the sort of the deck of cards we've got to play with, unfortunately.
Cool. Does that help, Jenna? And obviously,
thank you.
Pick up with Greg afterwards, and
I'll drop you a line, Jenna, and we can speak a bit later on.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay. Well, look, thank you ever so much for coming on, Jenna, and indeed for all of the contributors this afternoon, and of course to Susie and Greg for joining me in this session. It's really great. We've had sort of 30 plus people on the call at peak, still sort of 26, 27. So I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you've learned something. And if you need a recruiter, then talk to Greg. If you're looking for somebody to help you with your career search or working out what you want to do next, obviously Susie and I are here to talk to. I have recorded this call, albeit on my phone. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work. There is better technology out there to actually record these things, but unfortunately LinkedIn is not it's not part of the setup to record these audios. So depending on the quality of that, I'll cut it up and put it into some posts or put it on YouTube or something. And then I'll share it with my followers, so you can come back and get all the great advice and thoughts that the team have shared today. So thank you very much. I'm going to close it there. We will be back, no doubt. So watch this space. Thanks ever so much for some applauses there. Love it. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to end it there. Take care.